What's up, everybody? This is your boy Kamal once again, and today we have a really cool integral characterized by a parameter alpha, where alpha is a real number between 0 and pi by 2. So I of alpha is defined as the integral from 0 to alpha of x times the sine of x by 2 divided by square root cosine x minus cosine alpha. So it's a pretty interesting structure where the alpha parameter is part of both the integrand as well as an upper limit of integration. So how exactly do we approach this integral? Well, we have the sine of x by 2 term up top, so we might as well translate the cosine terms in the denominator to look something more like that by making use of the double angle formulae. So we know that we can expand the cosine of x as 2 times cosine square x by 2 minus 1. And this implies that I of alpha can be written as the integral from 0 to alpha of x times the sine of x by 2 divided by root 2 cosine square x by 2 minus 2 cosine square alpha by 2 dx. And now for a little u substitution, we're going to let x by 2 equal u, which implies that dx equals 2 times du. And this implies that I of alpha in the u world is now an integral from 0 to alpha by 2 of what exactly x would turn into 2 times u. So we have 2u here, and we have another factor of 2 because of the differential element, so that's 4. Divided by root 2 can be factored from the denominator, and let me just alter this just a little bit. And there we go. So we have 4 divided by root 2 outside, which is 2 times 2 by root 2, or 2 times root 2, and we have the sine of u du divided by root cosine square u minus cosine square alpha by 2. Now, instead of carrying the whole cosine alpha by 2 baggage with us throughout the solution development, we might as well give it a nicer name. So we're going to call cosine alpha by 2 beta. That makes it more compact. So that means the integral function is now I of beta, and it's 2 times root 2 times the integral from 0 to the inverse cosine of beta, which looks pretty cool, of u times sine u du divided by root cosine square u minus beta squared. And now for the obvious substitution here, we're going to let cosine u equal to beta times z, which implies that negative sine u du equals beta times dz. And as far as the limits of integration are concerned, well, we see that z is terribly sorry about that. Well, I'm terribly sorry about that. Z is actually 1 by beta times cosine u. So as u approaches the inverse cosine of beta, we have 1 by beta times beta, which is a 1. So that's our upper limit, and as u approaches 0, we have cosine 0, which is 1. So that means I of beta would be negative 2 times root 2 times the integral from 1 by beta to 1 of what exactly is u? Well, u would be the inverse cosine of beta z, and sine u du with the negative sign turns into beta dz, divided by root beta squared z squared minus beta squared. So we can factor out a beta term, and that would cancel out with the beta in the numerator, and this implies that I of beta equals negative 2 times root 2. We can get rid of the negative sign if we just switch up the order of the limits of integration. So we have 2 times root 2 times the integral from 1 to 1 by beta of inverse cosine beta z divided by root z squared minus 1 dz. Now, this video you're watching has advanced calculus in the title. And that's not exactly clickbait, because the solution development is going to make use of a really cool technique that is a really cool tool, I should say. And that tool is the Leibniz rule, the general form of the Leibniz rule, not the special case that's normally associated with Feynman's trick. This is where we're going to use the general form of the Leibniz rule. So here we go. We're going to differentiate with respect to the beta parameter, and that gives us the derivative of I with respect to beta, and this equals 2 times root 2, and now applying the Leibniz rule, we have the integral from 1 to 1 by beta of the partial derivative with respect to beta of inverse cosine beta z divided by root z squared minus 1 dz, and we add to it the integrand evaluated at the upper limit of integration. That would be, what exactly? We have inverse cosine of beta times 1 by beta, so some nice cancellation taking place, divided by root z squared minus 1 times the derivative with respect to beta of 1 by beta. Okay, cool. And now we also need a negative sign here, and the integrand evaluated at the lower limit, but the lower limit is a constant, so once we differentiate that with respect to beta, we're just going to get a big fat 0, so that takes care of itself. And wow, this is so hard. Let me just... much better? Nah. Okay, that's kind of bearable. Anyway, so we have, wait a second, we have the inverse cosine of 1, which is a big fat 0. So that means we have a 0 term over here as well. And so, yeah, this felt a lot more like just applying Feynman's trick, but that's out of sheer luck, because we have the inverse cosine of 1 here, which is 0. Anyway, that's pretty cool. That means we have the derivative of I with respect to beta equal to 2 times root 2 times the integral from 1 to 1 by beta of what exactly? We have this 1 by root z squared minus 1 term being treated as a constant for differentiation purposes, and the derivative of the inverse cosine function is negative, and in the denominator we have what exactly? Yeah, we would have 1 minus beta squared z squared, and because of the chain rule, we would have this z term upstairs. Okay, cool. Now this is a pretty interesting looking integrand, and it may seem unsettling at first, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Notice that we have both z squared minus 1 as well as z dz. So we could just let z squared minus 1 equal t squared, and this would imply that 2z dz equals 2t dt, where the 2's cancel out. So that means we have the derivative with respect to beta being negative 2 times root 2 times what exactly? As z approaches 1, we get 1 minus 1, which is a 0, and as z approaches 1 by beta, we would get 1 by beta times root 1 minus beta squared. Okay, so yeah, the entire video had really cool upper limits of integration. And what exactly do we have for the integrand? Well, z dz turns into t dt, and in the denominator we have root z squared minus 1, which is of course t, so now you see the utility of our substitution. There's some really nice cancellation taking place, and we have 1 minus beta squared times what exactly? It's t squared plus 1. Now for some algebraic simplification, it's negative 2 root 2 integral 0 to 1 by beta times root 1 minus beta squared dt divided by root 1 minus beta squared minus beta squared t squared, and we might as well factor out a beta term over here. So we have negative 2 root 2 divided by beta times the integral from 0 to 1 by beta times 1 minus beta squared, square root of that is, dt, and root 1 minus beta squared, terribly sorry about that, divided by beta squared minus t squared. Okay, cool. And now all I need here is an antiderivative. And this turns out to be the inverse sine function. So we have negative 2 root 2 by beta times the inverse sine of beta t divided by root 1 minus beta squared, with the limits being 0 and 1 by beta times root 1 minus beta squared. Now these limits are, again, pretty useful. Because as t approaches 0, we have inverse sine of 0, which is a big bad 0. And then as t approaches the upper limit, we have negative 2 root 2 divided by beta times the inverse sine of beta times 1 by beta times root 1 minus beta squared divided by 1 minus beta squared. And we have some lovely cancellation taking place, meaning that we have negative 2 root 2 divided by beta times pi by 2. I'd also like to thank my Patreon supporters for helping me make these videos possible. Now all that's left to do is to cancel out the 2's and now recover the integral function by integrating with respect to the beta parameter. So there we go. And now we have I of beta equal to, let's see what we have. We have negative pi times root 2 times the logarithm of beta. And of course, this could be written as the logarithm of 1 by beta plus a constant of integration c. And now for the constant, recall that the integral function was defined as an integral from 1 to 1 by beta. So if I take beta equal to 1, then that means I have the integral from 1 to 1, which is, of course, 0. So I of 1 equals 0, which is quite convenient, because that means we have 0 equal to pi times root 2 times log 1, and log 1 is 0 as well, plus c, which implies that the constant of integration conveniently evaluates out to 0. And this means that we have I of beta equal to pi times root 2 times the logarithm of 1 by beta. Now, recall that the integral function was defined in terms of an alpha parameter, and beta is in fact the cosine of alpha by 2, so 1 by beta would be the secant. So we have I of alpha sorting out to pi times root 2 times the logarithm of the secant of alpha by 2, which is a pretty cool result indeed. I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Do drop me a follow on Instagram as well. Thank you. See you next time.